Big time, no man, diamonds in my teeth, I got a lot of shine.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we are here after some minor technical difficulties. We are, of course, the DFS Army Fantasy Football Show. What's going on, DFS Army family? I've got my guy, Mike Dickinson. I am, of course, your host, Flex Shane. Follow all of our content over at dfsarmy.com or check us out on Twitter/X at Flex Network 1. We got our guy, Wet Blanket, a.k.a. Clipboard Jesus, in the chat so far. We're here, Mike Dickinson, to talk about the NFL Week 11 slate from a start-sit perspective, a.k.a. flex plays, sleepers, potential streamers. And we were chatting before the show, and we actually came up with a few of the similar players through a process, which is either a good thing or a bad thing, Mike. I'm not sure yet. Well, I guess to be determined. But you said it, and you said, like, it's kind of a chalky week this week. It's kind of like player guys. The upside players are in obvious matchups, but what are your initial thoughts on the slate this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where we got 10 weeks worth of data. You know who's good, you know who's not good, you know which matchups are good, you know which matchups aren't good. And with what we got going on with buys this week, like what you said, it's a pretty chalk week. Like usually when we go through and do this stuff, you know, we land on different guys, maybe we have an overlap, but like I left one of my guys out and we overlapped on two of them. So I think that we're kind of all thinking the same way. We're looking at data, and our process is also getting, you know, kind of tuned in as we move this far into the season. And like we're coming in beginning of week 11. You got 4 weeks to get your rosters right, to get yourself in position, understand your league setups. Like some of you get points for your last playoff spot. Some of you is just straight up records. So like do what you got to do. Make some deals, start to tune your rosters, start to trade for your handcuffs. You know, once your quarterback clears a bye, drop your second quarterback, deepen your roster with position guys. Like you gotta, this is the fourth quarter now, leading technically, maybe the third of the fourth quarter, however you like to look at it. But like this is the home stretch before you hit the playoffs.
Yeah. No, that's it, man. We've got a month before the fantasy football playoffs start, and this is also the week where a lot of trade deadlines are up, right? I don't know if you like a sleeper, which is a platform of our choice or my personal preference, and they'll have right at the top of your league, this is the last week to make trades. So this is the opportunity where it doesn't have to be anything crazy either, Mike. Like little things, like we talk about at this point in the season, you want to get to the playoffs and you need your resiliency through the playoffs. And one of the ways to do that is handcuffing, right? We always talk about high upside players throughout the season, and those are the types of players that we like to have on our bench. Even if that player that particular week might give you a 0, next week, given the opportunity, contingent upside is a common term we hear in the industry nowadays. Those are the types of players we like to bench. But as we get closer and closer to the playoff season, a couple things. One, rookies typically start to take off after week 10, right? So that's why I've been reluctantly holding Xavier Worthy in a lot of my season-long leagues. Obviously, Dynasty, you keep him, right? But a player like an Xavier Worthy, even a Keon Coleman, who's hurt again this week, those are the types of guys you want to keep on your bench because there's the upside there. But I also like the idea of consolidating your handcuffs, especially for your stud running backs at this point, right? So those are the types of players. And actually what's interesting here, we got a question from Connor. Connor, we'll get to your question real quick here before we get into our flex plays. But Audric Estime, right? So he's a name that coaches are talking about. He's going to start to get a lot more work, but I'm still a little bit reluctant to actually play him in a given week, right? Because what's your upside? Maybe you're going to get like 9-10 points in a PPR league, and you're basically hoping for that touchdown, right? Which, you know, I'm not sure that's necessarily the best thing. So, yeah, it's right now. Strategy is important. Having a resilient roster is important. But before we get into our flex plays, let's just give our guy Connor what he came for. We got to pick one flex and one running back, PPR. Okay, so we got Rico Dowdle, Audric Estime, Taysom Hill, Ricky Pearsall, and James Cook. So it's definitely James Cook for sure. You're definitely not benching James Cook. So really, for me, it's probably between like a Rico Dowdle or a Ricky Pearsall. This week, the Dallas team decided to come out and say, yeah, Rico's our guy, which we kind of knew that already, Mike. Like, I don't know what the hell the groundbreaking news was, but I'm probably going to lean Ricky here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm going Ricky Pearsall too. Houston's is a top 10 run defense, which means
Yeah.
that they're one of the 10 best run defenses in the league. So I don't think Dowdle's a particularly good runner. I just think he happens to be the runner in Dallas. I think they're going to get behind. I think they're going to have to throw. I think he gets game scripted out. So yep, I'll go Pearsall.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's pretty straightforward here. I mean, we're going to talk about Jennings a little bit later as a little flex play, but if you had a choice between Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall, I'm choosing Pearsall.
Yep.
You agree? I mean, like Pearsall's hanging out with Debo Samuel, like he's in the club, right? Like he's in the club, man.
These boys, and that San Francisco team looks like they're starting to come together at the right time. Like I think it's going to be a good game with Seattle this week. I know our guys Matt and Brandon do their Seattle show every Sunday, but I think that's going to be. Although Seattle center just retired, so I don't know.
I saw that, yeah,
out of nowhere,
out of left field.
Called it a career at 27. God love you, young man.
Mid-season, yeah, no kidding, hey. Jake Paul, 27, also fighting an elderly man. When Denny's definition of elderly is 55 plus to get the good deals on the menu, like you shouldn't be in a boxing match. But I digress. Let's get into, shall we, NFL Week 11 flex plays.
He's my best friend. He's my pal. He's my homeboy. My rotten soldier. He's my sweet cheese. My good time boy.
Okay, just kidding, Mike. Just kidding. Before I get into flex plays, I just thought about this. So, we talked to a lot of degenerates, Mike, and one of the things that I had a debate about, or just not really a conversation about with my buddies this week was, is the NFL game, the quality of the game, the entertainment, the joy of the game less than what it was 10, 15 years ago? And before I give you my thoughts, like what do you think? Like, do you enjoy watching the game as much as you used to when you were a kid or even 10 years ago?
Personally, I do.
Yeah.
But I think it's because I have a better understanding of the game now than I did when I was a kid. But I'm also 45 years old. So like I was a kid in like John Elway, Boomer Esiason, and Joe Montana. So that was, looking back, that might be the golden age of NFL football, or it could be like the 01, the beginning of the Patriots dynasty. But I just, having played football in high school and in college, my knowledge and understanding of the game, and then, hanging out with guys like you and Brandon and Matt and just talking football as much as we do, I feel like we pick up a lot more understanding of the game on an annual basis. So the more you understand the game, the more enjoyable it is to watch good games. Bad games, it makes it much more painful to watch. So I think the quality of the NFL product has gone up. I think that offenses are more creative, defenses are more creative back behind them. So I personally enjoy it more, but I could see where people do not enjoy it as much.
Yeah, man. Like the thing is, it's like, back when the Browns were hapless, they're kind of still hapless again, but the Lions were hapless. Nobody was watching those games anyways. So this year, Jaguars, nobody really wants the Jaguars. Patriots, nobody really wants to watch the Patriots unless you're a Patriots fan, right? So I think it might be one of these things where it's just fatigue as you're 10 weeks into a season, especially if you play a grindy game like fantasy football. My buddy is a big DFS player as well, so like that's definitely a grind. But was another thing that kind of came up in conversation was just in the amount of plays that NFL teams are running. And so I just did a quick little look. So I did more spot checks versus an actual comparison over the years, but the NFL is averaging, I should say, about, let's call it 61 and a half plays per team per week. Okay. This is offensive plays. About 10 years ago, it was about 63 and a half. So again, and I looked at a few different years, so it's not perfect science, Mike, but at first I'm like, okay, does this really have a major impact on fantasy football and scoring? And to think, okay, 2 plays per team per week probably doesn't really make a difference. But then you say, okay, that's 64 plays a week times the entirety of a season. And that does add up over team. That's basically 1 team per week not playing, if you put it that way, right? Because for the most part, there's going to be fantasy relevant players on a team, right? So I think that on a micro level, it probably doesn't have a really big difference on a week-to-week basis. But over the course of a season, when you're scoring probably 2, 3, 4 less fantasy points a game for players, that could certainly add up to the season. So that might also play into like a DFS player and their mentality. But yeah, just a bit of a tangent there, but also Final thing on DFS. Our guy Geek, our CEO, commander in chief of DFSarmy.com, he won 20K last week. So like, our players are winning, our members are winning real money. Our leaders are, the founders of this company are winning real money. So check it out, DFSarmy.com, DFSarmy.com. Mike, go to you. Give me your first flex play of NFL.
All right. So when I was putting my list together, we have the drop that you play when we throw out some really, really gross plays. It's the
This
no,
one?
no.
Hell no, to the no, yeah.
That is the drop right there. So I was like, man, I'm gonna get the turtle alert on this one. So we talk about our plays before the week, and lo and behold, we both had this play in here. So I got lucky enough to be gifted justifying this play. So my first play is gonna be Quentin Johnston. He hasn't been particularly great, but he's kind of come on a little bit as of late. So that LA Chargers passing offense they've been like top 7 in the league in pass rate over expected, which means in game neutral scripts, they are passing more than you would expect them to pass. And I think that this kind of flies in the face of what we thought the Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman offense was going to look like. We thought it was going to be run. And we saw that the last year that Lamar was in that offense with Greg Roman. He barely threw it all. You relied on his legs for his fantasy output. We've seen that. We saw it play out at the beginning of the year. J.K. Dobbins looked like he was shot out of a cannon, but as the season's progressed, we've kind of seen them, as Justin Herbert's got a hold of the offense a little bit more, they've started to pass a little bit more. So now they are in these game neutral strips, they're starting to pass more. And McConkey's been the benefit of that. But as of late, Quentin Johnston's been the benefit of that. So you look at them going up against Cincinnati this week. So Johnson's going to see a lot of Cam Taylor-Britt. If you're not familiar with Cam Taylor-Britt, he is one of the most favorable cornerbacks to line up against in the NFL. He is giving up about an average of 15 points a game. And Quentin Johnston isn't scoring that much, but he is averaging about 0.57 fantasy points per route run. So you look at that, Cam Taylor-Britt is giving up about 0.52 fantasy points per route run. So I think you see Quentin Johnston fall squarely in that 10, 12, 14-point range without a touchdown. If he happens to catch a touchdown, and we know at any given week he can catch a long touchdown, he's not been like that volume guy the way that Ladd McConkey has. Been a little bit better, but I think that you could easily see that flex up to 20 points.
Yeah, what's interesting is that, like, the Cincinnati Bengals, if you look at their record, it's pretty disappointing, right? But it's not because of Joe Burrow and the offense. It's because the defense is hapless, it's embarrassing, and it's letting the team down, right? It's letting Joe Burrow down. And a big part of that is because of players like Cam Taylor-Britt that are just giving up those big plays. And so then when you looked at it, Mike, like when you look at the ratio of slot fantasy points versus wideout fantasy points as well, because I originally I'm looking at this like Ladd McConkey would be a nice little play as well, but then the ratio is 75% of their fantasy points are going up to the wideouts versus the slot wide receivers, which is pretty significant, right? That leads the league in terms of the ratio. And as much as Quentin Johnston might be just a beneficiary of the fact that he is the wideout in that offense, and they are throwing more than we expected, he's going to get that opportunity over time. And as the season continues, I think Ladd is going to become the dog on that offense. We're kind of already starting to see it, but it doesn't mean that Quentin Johnston is going to be completely irrelevant in that offense. And so I like the matchup this week, going up against Cincinnati, because we also know that the Bengals can put up points. T. Higgins is going to be back this week.
Yep.
I think that's a Sunday nighter, isn't it? If I recall.
Yeah, it is. And
yeah,
you look at the games that Quentin Johnston's played this year, he's run between 16 and 23 routes every game that he's played in. He missed some time with injuries. So you look at what Taylor-Britt gives up, what he averages per route run. He's right in that 10, 11, 12 point range.
Yeah, no, I like that, man. I mean, it's funny. We were texting this morning with which of the players we wanted to talk about. We both said QJ, and we're like, fuck, this is an absolute disaster. Or it's just going to be pure fantasy gold. So yeah, but I think, by the way, like, I don't know about you, but like, just again, this is more based off of what I saw. There's no data driving it, but one of the most common players that I saw traded in the offseason this year was Justin Herbert. because people were saying, okay, listen, we're going to get out what we can with this guy, right? But one of the things we knew, Mike, and on the season, I think I was looking at it before the show, he's like quarterback 20. So he hasn't really been amazing, right? But to get away from a player that's young, that's talented, that's shown that he can be a game changer in the league, a lot of the times he just couldn't stay healthy in the season. Battling, like getting crack ribs early in the season and then playing the entire season with crack ribs, like that affects your throwing motions, right?
Yeah.
So to get out on the player because we thought that they were going to run more, it's probably a little bit short-sighted. And in hindsight, I wish I got a little bit more Justin Herbert. Again, it hasn't been groundbreaking for this season, but in Superflex, I would be comfortable starting him every single week. And as he continues to grow, as this team continues to develop, as Harbaugh continues to mold into the team that he wants, Herbert can be a sneaky little player. So he might still have that stink on him. And so maybe he's a player you go for and trade for if you're in a Superflex league. I don't really suggest going and trading for a quarterback and spending assets on a quarterback in a one quarterback league, unless you're a real contender and your quarterback's just an absolute trash heap. So yeah, cool. All right. So next player that I want to talk to you about, Michael, is one Khalil Shakir. So this one's interesting in the sense that I think that from an NFL perspective, we just talked about like love of the game. This is probably going to be the marquee matchup of the week, right? It's going to be the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Buffalo Bills. Can Josh Allen stay a Superman and give the Chiefs their first loss, man? Like we thought it was going to be the Denver Broncos last week. Miracles continue to happen for the Chiefs, but I think it's going to happen this week, and a big part of that's going to be Khalil Shakir. Obviously, we know Keon Coleman is out again this week. Dalton Kincaid is out this week, and one of the things we talked about all season is we like playing tight ends against the Chiefs, right? A few things, though. Amari Cooper is back, so on the outside, he's going to have a solidified wide receiver. He's expected to be back, I should say. But Khalil Shakir, man, like he continues to be a favorite target for Josh Allen. You look at his yards after the catch, and this one kind of threw me off here. He has 407 yards after the catch on the season. That ranks number 2 in the NFL so far, which I didn't expect. You look at his true catch rate, which means if it's a catchable ball, he has not dropped one. He has 100% catchable true catch rate. He's got an 88.9% actual catch rate, which is astounding, which means he's Mr. Reliable. And then he knows how to get target separation. He averages 5th, and this is per playerprofiler.com. He's 5th in terms of target separation. So I like the fact that it's never going to be easy against the Chiefs defense. But where do they allow points? They allow points to positions like the tight end. They don't have a tight end of real consequence this week. We got maybe a Knox we can talk about a little bit later. But ultimately, I think a lot's going to go to the slot. A lot's going to go to Khalil Shakir. And it's going to be a combination of Josh Allen being Superman. I think a lot of dump offs to guys like Shakir, going back to Connor's question with James Cook. Like those players are all in play this week. And I don't think in any situation I'm going to be benching Khalil Shakir. I love him as a flex play this week in my lineup.
Yep, 100%. I think this is going to be everything that you said. Verbal retweet, matchup of the week. Hopefully,
Yeah.
I think the entire world is rooting for, the officials aside, rooting for Kansas City to pick up their first L. And I think that, looking at the preseason, everybody expected Buffalo to kind of take a massive step back. People were talking about Buffalo not making the playoffs, outside looking in, and they are on a 5-game winning streak. They're 8-2. They are in the driver's seat. So, yep, I love it.
Love it. All right. Before we get to your next play here, we got a question from Nick in the chat. It's a 0.5 PPR. We need to pick one wide receiver and one flex. Okay. So we got BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr. It looks like Trevor Lawrence is going to be out again this week, which means it's Mac Jones throwing to him. We got Ladd McConkey, who we just talked about, Calvin Ridley, which I think we're going to talk about, and then Ken Walker, K9, going up against San Francisco. So the opponent has Justin Herbert. I mean, you could play some defense with Ladd McConkey, but it really comes down to just we want to score the most fantasy points, right? Like I don't care about playing defense. And for me, it's the flex is definitely going to be Ken Walker. Like I'm getting Ken Walker in my lineup. And I don't know, Calvin Ridley's kind of been coming on recently. So I would have a hard time benching Calvin Ridley. What do you think?
Yeah, for me, it's a toss up between Ridley and BTJ. Ridley has come on lately. I think you gotta. Last week was supposed to be their toughest matchup of this kind of stretch run for the Titans here. And he did well last week. So I would lean Ridley and Walker. Walker's 100%, even with the offensive line problems that Seattle has. Walker's in 100%. I would lean Ridley. If you are down or projected to be a dog, I would not fault you for going BTJ, because I think BTJ has a higher ceiling than Ridley does, but it seems like Ridley has a safer floor.
The problem that I have is that unless Brian Thomas Jr. gets in the end zone, he's pretty much been a non-factor, and it's really been disappointing, especially since Trevor Lawrence has been out last week in a 0.5 PPR. BTJ put up 2.2 points. He had 3 targets, 2 receptions. It was pretty painful. So now you could argue, okay, they're going to target him. Tank Bixby's also out, so it's going to be the Travis Etienne show. I just don't trust that offense, man. I just don't think that the Jaguars have anything to play for. Let me just see here in terms of what the over-under is, or what the implied team totals are for these ones. Yeah, so Detroit, oh my God. Detroit's a 30-point implied team total, and the Jags are 16. Yeah. So Vegas is saying that the Jags are going to get absolutely blown out. Again, you could say, well, that means they're going to throw more to Quinn or to Brian Thomas Jr. I just don't trust it, man. I just don't trust it. Mac Jones is a backup for a reason. So I just I like that Calvin Ridley's hot. And that's my choice. But I see what you're saying, Mike, like maybe a little bit more upside, but Ridley's been kind of playing like the BTJ role recently. He's getting deep down the field, and he's scoring touchdowns. So there's just not much else going on in that Tennessee offense, especially since Hopkins left.
Yep. Yeah. We'll go Ridley and Walker.
All right, cool. Go Ridley Walker. All right, brother. Give me your second flex play.
Oh, my second flex play. So we have a very, very small sample size to work off with this. So in the one game that we have seen San Francisco with its full complement of weapons. So full complement of weapons would be Brock Purdy at quarterback, Kittle at tight end, McCaffrey in the backfield, Pearsall, Samuel, and Juwan Jennings. It was last week in Tampa Bay. In that game, we saw Jennings run 35 routes, targeted 11 times, 7 catches for 93 yards. That was an incredibly juicy matchup. Tampa Bay is atrocious in all 3 corners, both the perimeter and the slot corner. So you look at it again. Of the 3 receivers that you would look at starting San Francisco, Jennings has the best matchup. So Jennings is averaging, he's clipping at 0.62 fantasy points per route run. He gets Witherspoon on the inside. He plays about half of his snaps on the inside. Of those 3, Witherspoon is the juiciest matchup. Tariq Woolen has gotten smoked a little bit, but I think he is a legit star in the making. So I like Juwan Jennings in this. Yes, McCaffrey is going to get his work, and I expect to see his workload increased a little bit. But I think Jennings is really a safety blanket for Purdy, in as much as Kittle is as well. Kittle's also a little bit banged up. It's questionable as to whether or not he's going to go this week. So we've seen Jennings rise to the occasion in multiple games. In the beginning of the season when everybody was out and it was just him, we saw him collect 3 touchdowns. So I like this week. I think that this game is going to shoot out. It's 48 over under, and I would not be surprised if it blows that out of the water. I wouldn't be surprised to see 55, 60 points out of this game. So I think this is going to be a fun game to watch. And I think that if you have pieces in this game, you got to try and get them in.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think that ultimately, I mean, obviously Brandon Ayuk isn't there, which he was a pretty important piece, Mike. But to your point, yeah, like they've got all their guys who are still active this season are healthy.
Yeah, I meant their full complement of weapons for this season.
Sure, got it. We saw JSN go nuclear last week. Obviously, they were on the bye, but 2 weeks ago, he went absolutely nuclear. I think it was like 37 points he put up in PPR.
Yep.
DK Metcalf is back this week. So we got K9. For all we know, he's healthy. I like playing players that are coming off a bye week, which means that if we think Seattle's going to score, then we better believe San Francisco's probably going to put up a lot of points too. So, yeah, I don't hate it, man. Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall. Obviously, you're playing your Debo, and I don't know. So, for those of you who are either in the playoff hunt or still in that bubble, and Christian McCaffrey just came back into your lineup, clouds have parted. The music is coming. It's funny. So I finally just watched Deadpool and Wolverine on Friday night. And I think about I just see this vision of like Christian McCaffrey walking in the field, and you have like that Madonna song playing, and it's just like, oh my god, it's epic! It's going to be amazing. I wish I could play it. I wish I had it right now, but Christian McCaffrey is going to be there, and he put up 16 points last week in PPR, and he's just going to get better, man. So if you survived this long, there's a reason CMC was a 101, and congratulations, he's going to get you into the playoffs, and hopefully, Mike, he's going to lead a few of us to some championships, because it's been a rough season otherwise.
I just traded for him in a keeper league. This is the first time I've ever owned any McCaffrey. Yeah, it was. So the McCaffrey owner was 0-10. So he's obviously keeper league. We can trade assets. It's kind of like think Diet Coke of Dynasty. So you can trade future draft picks, but I mean it's like a 20-round draft every single year. So I gave up a 6-round pick next year for McCaffrey and Jordan Mason, and I feel pretty good about that. So I feel protected if McCaffrey goes down. This is a league where I'm the number one team in points scored, but I'm also the number one team in points against. So I'm still like top 3. And the guy who's number one, who's leading the league, there's no points, no victory points, anything like that. He's 9th in the league in points scored, but he's 12th in points against. So like, it's one of those where like, if I'm going to drag this across the finish line, I need a hammer. And I was like, screw it. I'll punt next year's draft. I want my hammer. I want to take this thing across the finish line.
Love that, man. Love that. Yeah. Isn't that sweet? Like, especially when you've been the victim of crappy matchups. It just happens to be that week you go up against the highest scoring player. But then as the season goes on, like law of numbers, right? Like obviously the fantasy football season is a small sample size by definition, but still law of numbers typically will play out. If you've got a good team, you'll slowly start to do well. And if you've got a crappy team and you're doing well, you're probably going to slowly start to recede down to the bottom of those standings. But all right, brother. Okay, my next player is, dare I say, Darnell Mooney is having a career resurgence with Captain Kirk at the Atlanta Falcons. Like, so this week they're going up against Denver, and yes, I understand that Denver is a tough defense, but you look at both the pace of play, so snaps per game for these offenses. Again, we were talking about it. If the league average is call it 63 plays on average, when we're looking back, it's closer to 61 this season. Well, Atlanta's at 66 and Denver's at 65. That ranks 6 and 8 respectively, right? So I like the fact that there's going to be lots of opportunities for these guys to score points. And you look at some of the peripheral numbers, like air yards on the season. Darnell Mooney, kind of reminds me of Calvin Ridley, but Darnell Mooney is at 959 air yards on the season. That ranks number 5, Mike. He ranks number 6 with deep targets. Obviously, they kind of come hand in hand. He's got 17 on the season. He's averaging 1.7 a game, which means he's going to be given. You're going to have an opportunity to get that single play that's worth like 12, 13 points, right? If you can get a long touchdown, like those are just absolutely slate breaking and just crush your opponent's soul. So that's what I like to see. And then he's doing just in general, like he's being productive. He's ranking number 6 in terms of receiving yards with 684. So obviously he doesn't have a ton of touchdowns, but we love the touchdown upside that just those deep targets provide to him. And he's also getting peppered. Like he's 7th in targets for on the season. He's got a 24% target share, which ranks 25. So all the peripherals, all the fantasy numbers are pointing to Darnell Mooney as being an absolute steal of the draft. I mean, he was going essentially forgotten, right? Like, his ADP coming into the season was 135. He was sure, why not? I need a little bit of depth, and he's really winning a lot of people, or doing really well for people if you actually had the courage to draft him in the season. So coming up this week, going up against Denver. If you looked at this matchup, maybe say at the start of the season, you would have been like, yuck, but I like it, man. I like it a lot.
Yep. So the other thing that kind of pushed me to Mooney, because this was one that I had as well. The other thing that pushed me to Mooney was the strength of Patrick Surtain and the weakness of Atlanta's defense. So you look at Atlanta's defense is 24th in overall DVOA, which means DVOA takes into account all sorts of factors, like not just fantasy points against or yards against or anything like that. It takes into account specific situations. So it's more of a true picture of the strength of the defense. So that means that Atlanta's defense is a bottom 7 defense. And you look at who Drake London's lining up against. London is lining up against Patrick Surtain. So Patrick Surtain is the closest thing that we see in today's NFL to Darrell Revis, when Nnamdi Asomugha was there, those cornerbacks that we saw in like the late beginning part of the 2012, 2015, somewhere around there. Like he is as close to what we have to a shutdown corner as exists in the NFL today. He's giving up less than 5 fantasy points per game. He's giving up 0.17 fantasy points per route run. Like this guy is a blanket. So Atlanta is going to go away from him. So this is as much about Drake London and the phenomenal season that Drake London is having as a lack of confidence, or it's about a lack of confidence in Drake London and confidence in Darnell Mooney. Also, the fact that the Denver offense is starting to come together, starting to gel pretty well, and Atlanta's a soft defense. So you look at what the over-under is on this game, it's 44.5. I would take the over. I would take the over on this game. I think it's going to shoot out. I think you're looking at 48, 49 points out of this game.
Yeah, it's going to be another fun one.
Who would have thought we would love to watch Bo Nix?
I got to say, man, I was let's say tepid in terms of Bo Nix, especially with my with my fantasy rankings, like my rookie rankings. I had Bo Nix behind players like a Jonathan Brooks, like just because I thought that Bo was going to be one of these players and he's drafted high because of necessity, and then he fizzles out of the league. But so far, we're seeing that he's been very, very productive. So, been definitely wrong about that. Dare I say I take the L? I don't know if we're quite there yet. We'll see. I need a little bit more time for his career to play out. But yeah, congratulations, Bo Nix. You're making Cortland Sutton fantasy relevant, which is all I frankly care about. I've got an interesting little question here in the chat. So this is coming from Periaco. They can trade Jalen Waddle for Ladd McConkey, but they'd have to drop Jonathan Brooks to do it. The RBs are, other than Brooks, are Kyron Williams, Chase Brown, so 2 studs, and Rico Dowdle. Should they do it? They also have Tyreek Hill. So if they don't do the trade, they'll be stuck with Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and they are 3-7, so they have to win. And basically, they have to make some desperate moves here. I think really what it comes down to is, would you rather have Waddle and Jonathan Brooks? Jonathan Brooks, of course, Carolina is on their bye week this week, which means you're holding that value this week. But got to think, Jonathan Brooks, he's gonna probably get some usage as we end up the season. I would personally rather stick with Jalen Waddle and just trust the process. But what do you think?
Yeah, I would too. They just paid Chuba Hubbard a bunch of money. Like they paid Chuba Hubbard like Derrick Henry money, which is wild. So I don't think Chuba Hubbard's going anywhere. Carolina's not going anywhere this year. It seems like that offense is a little more functional now since they put Bryce Young back in, but it's not great. You got to win this week. Brooks isn't helping you at all this week.
Pause.
But
Pause. Do you realize what you just said?
What?
The offense is looking more functional with Bryce Young. How far we've come, hey?
Yeah, dude, I do not like Bryce Young at all, but this was not a Bryce Young show by any stretch, but it looks slightly more functional. It looks like sitting him down for a time actually had a little bit of a benefit. So, yeah, I think you just hold the line. I also think that you got to believe that the Miami offense is going to start to put it together at some point. I don't think you're going to see single-digit, low double-digit weeks out of Tyreek and Waddle every single week. Like it's gotta start coming together. It's got to start gelling. I mean, neither of them have had great weeks since week 1. So at some point, you got to hope that they turn the corner. They get Las Vegas this week. If there ever was a get right week this week, it would be it. I think you sit tight.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the schedules here really quickly for Lads. So this week, obviously, they're going up against Cincinnati. We already talked about that. But then they're playing Baltimore, which their defense hasn't been as stout, but they're still the Baltimore Ravens. Atlanta Falcons, not a bad matchup. Kansas City Chiefs, that's a rough matchup. So that's the next 4 weeks to get you into the fantasy football playoffs. I just don't think Ladd McConkey is enough of an upgrade to then have to drop Jonathan Brooks, because I agree with you. I think Chuba's going to stick around, but I also feel like if they activated Jonathan Brooks, okay, they could have chosen to not activate him off IR, just kept him and had a write-off on the season. They chose to activate him. He wasn't active last week, which kind of sucked. They've got the bye week this week, which allows them a little bit more time to install him in the offense. I think people who, and I just faded away Chuba to our guy Brandon. So I'm a little bit bearish on the outlook for Chuba as the season's going to progress and as it finishes. Maybe they're going to say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I also believe they spend a high draft pick on this running back. Experience is so important. Getting real life NFL experience is so important. I think Jonathan Brooks is going to have a role in that offense. So I personally would rather roll the dice with an upside of a guy like a Jonathan Brooks on my bench, knowing that maybe maybe Chuba gets hurt, right? In which case, if Jonathan Brooks goes in there and basically replaces a Chuba Hubbard role, and he's the one getting the market share, the lion's share of that the backfield, then he could be the guy to go nuclear. So I just don't think the upgrade from McConkey from Waddle is enough to justify losing Brooks, and that's kind of what's going to my equation. Straight up, if it was just Waddle for McConkey, yeah, I'd probably take McConkey because Waddle has frankly been very disappointing. But, and this is another thing too, is that we can't just take this season and say, okay, Waddle's dust now. He's a good player. We've got enough years of data to show that Jalen Waddle is a good player. He just hasn't gotten hot. And the thing is that he works off targets. And the fact that Tua was hurt for so many weeks, Mike, like, I just say trust the process, have faith that Miami offense is still good. They're desperate. But before we move on, I just want to do a really quick gut check here. I want to take a look at what Waddle's rest of the season looks like, or getting into the playoffs. So this week they play the Las Vegas. Next week they play the Patriots, which that's not a bad offense to go against. Then they play Green Bay. Then they play the Jets. The playoff schedule is, Houston, San Francisco, Cleveland. So I don't know. I think it's close, but I'm still going to lean Jalen Waddle.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, brother. Okay, let's move on. Hopefully that
helps.
helps.
If you're still in the chat, the other.
Oh, not sure if that's me or you, Mike. I think we might have lost Mike for a second there.
Oh, there we go.
You're back. Okay, go ahead,
Yep.
Mike.
Yeah, so he's been activated off IR, so you had to pull him off your active roster. You had to pull him from your IR spot into your active roster. Are you getting something else back with McConkey that you have to drop him? Is there another piece coming back? Like, is there what else you got? What else you got going on that you got to drop Brooks? So if you're still in, if you could drop that back in, that might give us a little bit more context.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I believe it is. I think it's back to you, Mike.
Yep, my go. All right, so we touched on this a little bit. We touched on this player a little bit earlier, and I had some other folks that I was contemplating. But I think I'm going to go with Calvin Ridley for my last flex play for all the reasons that Shane outlined before. Will Levis is back. I thought that Will Levis was kind of cooked, but it doesn't look like he is as cooked as I had thought he was. Offense looks somewhat functional last week. They go up against Minnesota this week, so I think that you see Minnesota kind of bounce back off that poor performance they had last week. Sam Darnold threw like 5 interceptions. It was not a good game for them. Really, even with Levis or with, I think the knock was that with Levis versus Mason Rudolph, he wasn't getting the volume, but we saw last week, the Mason Rudolph games, he was 9, 15, and 8. And then he came back last week and Levis targeted him 9 times. He's still running about 30, 40 routes a game. So he's still very involved in the game. He's going to spend most of his time up against Stephon Gilmore, who Stephon Gilmore is not the player you remember from the Buffalo days. He's kind of a shell of his former self. He's getting up there in age. He's given up about 0.3 fantasy points per route run. So you're looking at Ridley running 30 to 40 routes a game. He's firmly in that 10, 12 point range. And I think a touchdown is in the range of outcomes for him every single week. So I feel good about feel good, maybe not, but I feel okay playing Calvin Ridley in my lineups this week.
Yeah, another thing too is Tyjae Spears is back, and I think he stayed healthy last week. So just having him, I think he's got a little bit more burst right now in his career than Tony Pollard. So it just helps the offense overall and gets him into a touchdown scoring situations, which Calvin, like, he's the dog in that offense right now. He is the guy in that offense. And when in doubt, that's what you want, right? You want opportunity. And Calvin Ridley's going to give that to you. Do I love it? Do I hate it? Let's call it tepid. Minnesota, man. So Sam Darnold, he started hot, and they've been haven't looked great the last few weeks. Do you think just the magic's worn off, or what do you think?
Well, we see why he's Sam Darnold and why he was on the market, and they got him for $10 million. Like he was a world beater beginning and looked like he was seeing ghosts last week. So we'll see where they end up this season. I still think they're probably going to make the playoffs. So
Oh, here we go. So, Mike, you're off again, but we got Prego. They have Evans on IR right now, but they have to take him out next week. Tyreek trade got me 3 players up. Oh, there you go. I'm just answering the question here. So the Tyreek trade got me 3 players and traded away 2. So again, extra player will have to drop Jerry Jeudy. Okay, who cares? He's dropping Jerry Jeudy, so that's droppable to make room for Tyreek Hill, Mike. Yeah, so I have no issues with that. I'd say stay the course, man. Stay the course.
Yeah, stay the course. Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think we're at the stage of the show where let's talk about like just a few kind of absolutely filthy, nasty, disgusting players.
Yeah.
And then we'll close it out. So one of the guys I want to talk about, and listen, if he's still on your roster, if you're gonna play him, this is the week you're gonna play him, and that's Nick Chubb. Okay, so the eye test isn't great, but they were obviously just on the bye last week. They're going up against New Orleans. In New Orleans this week, actually, if you're streaming defenses, I kind of like New Orleans as a streamer this week going up against Cleveland. We just know Jameis. One, he's actually got a lot of experience in that building, and he's got a lot of experience throwing interceptions in that building with a long career with Tampa Bay. And it's not like the Cleveland Browns are kind of hapless right now, but the New Orleans Saints are 3rd worst in terms of fantasy points allowed to running backs. It could just be a nasty game, but if you're desperate, you're either at this point in the season, you're either going to drop Nick Chubb, Mike, or you're going to play him this week as a flex player, like a second flex. I'm not saying this is somebody you want to cram into your lineup, but I don't hate Nick Chubb this week. And here's the thing. They're actually favored this week by about a point. It's a coin toss game, but both teams aren't great. We saw the dead cat bounce last week from the Saints when they beat the aforementioned Atlanta Falcons. But could be a good opportunity. Cleveland's going to come in and hopefully put up a few points against these guys, and I think Nick Chubb's going to be part of that on the ground.
It is the Jameis Winston revenge game. Let us not forget that narrative. Jameis Winston revenge game.
There you go.
No, I like it. New Orleans is the 2nd worst defense against the run. So they absolutely bleed production running backs. I think that Cleveland wins this one going away, which means that Chubb's involved a decent amount. So it's gross, but I like it.
Okay, I know you got one nasty one. Give me another nasty one.
So I got a 1 and a 1A in the nastiness. So in that same game, plug your nose, MVS. They really don't have anybody else left to throw to there. It's MVS, Cedric Wilson, and Mason Tipton. Cleveland's DBs have typically been a strength, but they're all pretty bad this year. MVS moves around enough where he's gonna line up against all 3 of them. He showed that he could go for multiple touchdowns in a game. So if you're desperate, you got somebody on bye, you got some guys hurt, you can pick him up, plug him right in. Feel good about it? Meh, but you can do it, and he's probably not going to deliver you a 0. The other one that I had was Dawson Knox. We talked about him. He is more of a traditional tight end than Dalton Kincaid is. So don't plug him in and expect 1-for-1 route participation or production. He plays much more in line rather than move and flex the way that Kincaid does. That said, Kansas City is the worst team in the league against tight ends. They give up almost 80 yards a game to tight ends. They're right in that 6-7 catch a game area. So like you're looking at 5 for 50 with a non-zero chance of a touchdown. If you're desperate for tight end this week, you got Trey McBride on a bye, something like that. You can pick up Knox and start him. We also talked about the fact that, Keon Coleman's not playing. Amari Cooper's coming back off that wrist injury. The strength of the Kansas City defense is the front 7 and the perimeter corners. So that's why they're soft in the middle. We like Shakir, and you kind of like Dawson Knox for the same reason. So if you're desperate, he's a pickup start play.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I really don't hate it. A few honorable mentions that I have, Mike. These aren't nasty players, but Lad McConkey was on my honorable mention. We've already talked to him about him a little bit. Jackson Smith and Jigba. I don't care necessarily that DK Metcalf is back this week. A responsible coaching staff is going to continue to get that guy involved, just because he really is a difference maker, and it really should be him and DK and then Ken Walker. Like those are the trifecta. And I believe Noah Fant is also out. So it's that where they play in similar parts of the field. Like this is the opportunity. And I don't know, man. Like it's becoming close. Like between who's the best wide receiver on that offense. Big play explosiveness, probably still DK, but just pure wide receiver talent. I think JSN is kind of showing why he was a top drafted wide receiver off the board last year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's a much more complete wide receiver. DK is a freak. He's a physical specimen.
Yeah.
He is a threat to take it to the house anytime he touches it. But like, if you look at what Seattle should want to do to stay in that game, they should want to control the pace, keep the ball, move down the field with purpose, control the line of scrimmage. I don't know they're going to be able to control the line of scrimmage, but like it's run game, it's the stuff over the middle, the shorter intermediate routes to JSN, and then shot play to DK. So I like it.
Sweet brother, yeah. I mean, I think that's going to be a fun game. When I look at like the games that I want to watch this week, like that's probably up there. I don't know. The Detroit-Jacksonville game isn't a game that necessarily draws me because of Jacksonville, but Detroit's kind of doing something special right now. And so that's a game that I wouldn't mind enjoying watching, and it looks like they could just absolutely smash. And as much as Caleb hasn't been great, Chicago-Green Bay, those NFC North games are always a lot of fun. So that's a game. So I think it's going to be a fun little slate this week.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
I like the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game a lot. I think that's going to be an extremely entertaining game. Extremely entertaining.
Yes, good point. Yeah, that's a good call out. The Thursday nighter was a lot of fun. It was kind of a slow first 3 quarters, but that fourth quarter, man, was a lot of fireworks. Your Eagles obviously got the job done and they came away with a W, but I don't know if Washington decided to kick the field goal instead of going for it on fourth down there, then they might have had a legitimate chance to actually go and put up some points. So obviously, ifs and buts.
Hey,
but,
a win's a win. We'll take that one. A win's a win. But yeah,
brother.
And who knew that the answer to the question in the first round was Saquon Barkley?
Hey man, listen, all I'm going to say, Mike, is my flag plant, and maybe what's crazy, it was controversial at the time. I said, you must draft Saquon Barkley. You must draft him. And frankly, I'm kicking myself for not drafting enough Saquon Barkley. But for the few leagues where I do have him in, man, you're sitting pretty. I'm going up against in one of our long-standing dynasty leagues. I'm going up against Zlowski, who's got Saquon Barkley this week. So that kind of it's like a big kick in the nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, he looks special. He looks special. And
he looks happy.
Yes. That whole Eagles offense, man, like everything that was going wrong last season, it feels like they kind of got through that. They got through the fire, and I think you're going to be stronger for it. So as we go and we're starting to get like these like real NFL playoffs and the standings are starting to show, like it's going to be a battle between Detroit and the Eagles in terms of who's going to have that NFC dominance. And I don't know. I get the feeling this year, Mike, that it might be an NFC champion over the AFC in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it'd be nice. Like it's kind of the AFC has owned it for a while, so it'd be nice to see it swing back that way. I think that when you look at the Eagles' offense, a lot of the issues that they had that slogged them down at the end of the season last year, there was a lack of offensive creativity and just seemed like there was a real proclivity to move away from the run game. Yeah. They've kind of dispensed with that, and I think that having Kellen Moore there has been a huge benefit for Jalen Hurts, for the entire offense. And also, like you saw, Hurts wasn't good on Thursday night. Like he missed a wide open AJ Brown on the sideline. He wasn't seeing the field well. So when Hurts is not playing well, you just say, screw it. We're going to lean back into the run game and let Saquon take it. They didn't have that last year. I mean, it was Kenny Gainwell and Scott. So like, it just wasn't there that you could lean into it. And it's nice having that offensive line. They got their left tackle back this week, Jordan Mailata. He was out for a month with a hamstring. So it all kind of came together. It's all starting to come together for him. And it's going to be, and listen, with San Francisco starting to come together too, it's going to be a real interesting end of the season here in the NFC.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it, man. And in the AFC, who knows? But it's probably going to be Chiefs or Bills. I would, if I was a betting man. And Baltimore.
Baltimore looks real good too. Baltimore's defense is suspect, but I wouldn't count them out.
They're just like, I don't know if I trust them to win the games they need to win. That's my only thing. Like, will they get to the playoffs? Of course. Yeah. Lamar is going to win MVP. He's a special player, but do they have enough to win those close games? I don't know. It's going to be fun, but I would love to see it. I'm not quite there yet on it. And that's it, brother.
Yeah.
Hopefully Deontay Johnson can actually do something for the Baltimore Ravens on that note. But hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for all the questions in the chat. Honestly, that's why we're here, right? This is a labor of love. We love coming out. We love answering your questions. We love playing fantasy football. So hit us up on Twitter at the Flex Network 1, at Mike_Dickinson, at DFS Army. And of course, where do we hail from? DFSarmy.com, DFSarmy.com. If you play DFS, I'm telling you, the tools, the systems, the processes, they work. It's not just the geek winning money. It's our members winning money, stacking helmets at the top of leaderboards, not just NFL, MMA, baseball when it was in, hockey, basketball. We do all the sports, esports. It's all there. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining. Oh, we got a quick one from Chaka before we get out of here.
Ooh.
Got to start either Ridley, ETN, or Amari Cooper, PPR. I'm going probably, it's between Ridley and Cooper for me. I'm probably going to go Ridley in this case. What do you think? It's close, though. It's super close. I have a hard time benching Cooper.
I think I would bench Cooper. I'm closer on ETN than you are. No Tank Bigsby this week. Detroit's run defense is nasty, but I wonder how much garbage time ETN gets. I think the rule of flexology is you generally tend to lean into the volume.
The running back.
So that would lead us to ETN. It's been tough, though. It's been tough.
I think he's injured.
Yeah, I think he's dinged up too. I think I'm going to lean Ridley. I'm going to work against the rule of flexology and lean in Ridley as well.
Yeah, so Chaka, honestly, I think all three options are good. I like Amari Cooper a lot. For me, it would have been a snap call 4 weeks ago for Amari Cooper, but coming off the injury, going up against the Chiefs, they're tough.
He's also playing with a cast on.
Oh, and he's going to be playing with a cast on, because he's got the wrist injury. So
he broke his wrist,
let's lean Ridley, and good luck. Okay. And you wouldn't play ETN over Jones or Walker? No, you play Aaron Jones, play Walker. Yeah, cool. All right, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining. DFSarmy.com. We'll be back next week for NFL Week 12. Good luck.
Big time, knowing that.